An MVP trophy is like the Black Eyed Peas.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
No, it's not. It
gets the people going.
Kareem has 6, Michael has 5, LeBron has 4, and Kobe has just one more MVP award than Ian Clark. Though, to be fair, it can be argued that Steve Nash has 2 from the middle of Kobe's prime. Since they're so integral to the legacy of a player, debates surrounding controversial MVP winners can linger for decades. Seriously, just search Google or social media, and you'll see people using MVPs to justify whatever historical NBA opinion they have. Only the dreaded,
"Oh, but how many rings does he have?"
mic drop is used more often. Both of Nash's MVPs are in that conversation, as is Derrick Rose's, Russell Westbrook's, and both of Karl Malone's. While these awards are debatable, none hold a candle to the questionable accolade of Don Otten. And here, right now, you are asking yourself, did I just start watching a ClutchPoints mini documentary about a guy named Don Otten? Yes you did. I'm Frank Smith, and this is the story of the worst MVP and his unbreakable record. We're talking 40s and 50s basketball. For most of you, well before your parents were even born. It was an era of the game where even the most basic fundamentals were barely developed. Guys were dribbling with their heads down, the rim might as well have been located on the moon, and even if you could dunk, it was illegal. If we were to drop Jamal Crawford into that era, we'd probably be talking about him as the GOAT right now. That's right, Jamal, the GOAT of the 40s. That time in NBA history is going to be derisively nicknamed the era of white and height in some circles. And Otten fit the bill. Between his skin color's relative luminance value of 219.5, which means he was 90% of the way to bleach white, and his height of 6'10", which only 2 players, Chuck Scher and Jim Slaughter, could match up with. For real, imagine subbing in Brian Scalabrine back then. Or even guys we consider busts, like Hasheem Thabeet would have been Wilt Chamberlain, before Wilt. But Otten's NBA career was far from outstanding, playing just 4 years for 5 different teams before retiring at 31. So how could he possibly end up with an MVP? Well, for that, we have to travel back to a weird time that was technically before the NBA existed, but not officially before the NBA existed. Just relax, my guy. I'm about to explain. Before the NBA was the NBA, it was 2 different leagues. The Basketball Association of America, or BAA, and National Basketball League, or the NBL. Otten chose the NBL over the better-known BAA after his career at Bowling Green. There he had developed a serious reputation as a great goalie. And yes, that is what it sounds like. His main goal every game was to play the role of something we might equate with a goalkeeper in soccer or a goaltender in hockey. Keep the ball from going in at all costs. Think of him like Rudy Gobert, but not as talented, athletic, or generally good at basketball. Goaltending wasn't only legal at the time, it was encouraged as a legitimate game plan, and Don was one of the best at it. You might be saying, oh my god, that couldn't have been legal. Remember, the 40s and 50s had a bunch of tiny humans who could barely jump over phone books trotting about the hardwood. The amount of guys who could purposely goaltend was like 3. But anyway, enough about that. Back to Don the Octopus Otten. After Bowling Green, he was off to the NBL's Tri-Cities Blackhawks, a team that we now know today as the Atlanta Hawks. His reasoning made perfect sense. It was simply the closest option that could afford to pay him, which was important considering the league didn't nearly pay the money they do these days, and just about every player had to have a day job. Essentially, it would be like if LeBron James played full-time, but also worked full-time as a manager at TGI Fridays. His choice of Tri-Cities became very important by the summer before his 3rd season for 2 reasons. One is that during that summer, his team signed a college star named Murray Weir from Iowa to complement his game. This wouldn't be a huge problem except for the fact that Weir had already been drafted by the BAA's infamous Fort Wayne Pistons. The BAA threatened to sue, and that dispute almost ended the talks between the 2 leagues to merge into the NBA entirely. They eventually came to a deal that let the Blackhawks keep Weir in exchange for a fee, and it was absolutely not worth it, considering Weir went on to average just 4 points. Can you say bust? Somewhere, Chandler Parsons has to be smiling. For Otten's immediate legacy though, we should note that some of the NBL's best teams, except the Tri-Cities, were already ditching the NBL in favor of the BAA before the 48-49 season began. Both the Minneapolis Lakers and the Rochester Royals, the 2 teams that had just played in the championship, left. as did the Fort Wayne Pistons and the Indianapolis Jets. That meant Arnie Reisman would no longer be there, which also meant Al Cervi would no longer be there, and most importantly, that meant George Mikan, the best player in all of basketball by far, would no longer be there. It meant the MVP race was wide open because most of the actual good players were no longer in the league. It's like Dion Waiters' ultimate fantasy. So wide open that Otten took the award while averaging just 14 points, and well, no one really knows how much of anything else because the only official stats the NBL kept were points, field goals, and free throws. He helped his team to the 4th best record in the league, and they lost in the conference finals to the Oshkosh All-Stars. A real team, I swear. Also, a team that would cease to exist just 3 months later. That summer, the merger finally happened and Otten became one of the original NBA players. He would never make an All-NBA team, he would never make an All-Star team, and he would never really find a stable home in the league. Because, again, he wasn't particularly all that good, especially against sincerely talented competition. But he does have a place in the record books, and one that may never be beaten. In their 12th game in the NBA, the Tri-Cities Blackhawks faced off against something called the Sheboygan Redskins. At that time, Sheboygan looked like one of the best teams in the NBA. As it turns out, they weren't. They would lose their next 9 games. What made Sheboygan stand out, though, was the ridiculous extent to which they would draw fouls. They'd make James Harden and Giannis Antetokounmpo wince. For this particular game, the Tri-Cities coach decided to go along with that and have his players foul them as much as possible. That night, Sheboygan made 54 free throws. That's both insanely gross and downright impressive. We don't know exactly how many they attempted, but what we do know is that they shot just over 70% that year, so somewhere around 80 would be a good bet. Another thing we know is that 6 Tri-City players fouled out, and since they only had 10 guys suited up to play, the 6th guy to reach 6 fouls got to stay in the game. That just so happened to be Don Otten, who then got a chance to pick up his 7th foul, and then his 8th. He made that record less than a month into the NBA's modern existence, and it's still both unbroken and seemingly unbreakable. It took 50 full years for another player to even reach 7, until Cal Bowdler did it for the Atlanta Hawks on November 13th, 1999. Forget Wilt Chamberlain's 100 points in a game, or his 50.4 points per game in a season, or 27.2 rebounds per game in a season, or 20,000 women. All of these supposedly NBA records, all of which seem to be held by Wilt Chamberlain, Don Otten's is the real unbreakable one. One that no one wants, that was done almost immediately in the timeline of the NBA's history, and then never again, by basketball's least deserving and most forgotten MVP. Don Otten is a hero, and I'll fight anyone who suggests otherwise. Just kidding, but a big thanks to all who watched and to the tremendous team at ClutchPoints who produced this. As always, I'm Frank Smith. You can follow me at FMS_Frank Smith and follow ClutchPoints at ClutchPoints. If you enjoyed this mini documentary, check out many more on our ClutchPoints Facebook, IGTV, and YouTube. Until next time.